I stood in the middle of a dazzling Christmas party, surrounded by twinkling lights and clinking glasses, but I felt like the biggest nobody in the room. My sister Sophia, the family's golden child, just sneered at me in front of everyone, calling me a PowerPoint jockey who'd never touch her tech genius. Then my grandpa, James, dropped a bombshell that froze the entire penthouse. My company bought hers for $60 million, and I was the one who made it happen. If you've ever been laughed at, overlooked, or told you're not enough, this story's for you. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. I love seeing how far this reaches. Now, let's dive into the moment that flipped my family's world upside down, right in the heart of a glitzy Manhattan penthouse. Picture this. Christmas Eve in a jaw-dropping penthouse overlooking Manhattan's skyline, where the city lights sparkled like a million dreams. The air was thick with the smell of mulled wine, roasted duck, and my mom's peppermint brownies, the kind of scene that screams holiday magic. But for me, Ethan, it was a pressure cooker. My family, parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, were gathered around a towering Christmas tree, hanging on every word from Sophia, the so-called startup queen. She was in her element, champagne in hand, spinning a tale about how her company, Starlight Ventures, chose to merge with Apex Global, like she was the one calling the shots. My parents, William and Elizabeth, beamed with pride, their eyes practically glowing as she talked about her strategic triumph. Me? I'd just walked in, exhausted from a brutal day at the office, trying to slip through unnoticed. Then Sophia's eyes locked onto me, her smirk sharp enough to cut glass. "Oh, here's Ethan," she said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "The guy who thinks a spreadsheet is cutting-edge tech." The crowd chuckled, each laugh like a jab to my gut. My face burned, but I was used to it. 35 years of her jabs, her dismissal, her stealing every spotlight. I was ready to grab a drink and fade into the background like always. But then Grandpa James, 82 years old with a mind like a steel trap, set his scotch down with a deliberate clink. "That's quite a story, Sophia," he said, his voice calm but heavy, like a judge about to rule. "You make it sound like you held all the cards." He turned to me, his eyes piercing. "Ethan, you're in that world. Can a company on its last legs really demand a $60 million deal?" The room went dead silent, every eye on me. My heart pounded. This wasn't just a question. It was a match tossed into a pile of dynamite, and I was holding the fuse. That moment in the penthouse, with every eye in the room pinned on me, felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. The glittering Manhattan skyline stretched out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a dazzling backdrop of ambition and dreams. But inside, the air was thick with tension. The scent of gingerbread cookies and mulled wine couldn't mask the suffocating weight of my family's expectations, or rather, their lack of expectations for me. My name is Ethan, and for 35 years, I've been the invisible son in a family obsessed with my sister, Sophia, the so-called queen of startups. To them, she was the sun, and I was just a shadow trailing in her wake. Picture the scene. A Christmas party in full swing at my parents' luxurious Manhattan penthouse. The room was a postcard of holiday cheer. A towering Christmas tree draped in gold ornaments, a crackling fireplace casting a warm glow, and a table groaning under the weight of roasted duck, cranberry sauce, and my mom, Elizabeth's famous peppermint brownies. It was the kind of setting that screamed wealth, success, and togetherness. But for me, it was a stage, and I was the understudy who never got a line. Sophia, 4 years older, was the star of this production. She was the one who dazzled everyone with her MIT degree, her TED Talk at 25, and her startup, Starlight Ventures, which she claimed was revolutionizing AI-driven logistics. My parents, William and Elizabeth, couldn't mention her without a glow of pride so bright it left no room for anyone else. "Sophia's changing the world," my dad would say, his voice practically trembling with awe. "She's a visionary." And me? I was just Ethan, the guy who worked in business, a word my family spat out like it was something cheap and unworthy. To them, real success meant coding algorithms or building apps, not crunching numbers or strategizing deals. That night, Sophia was in her element, standing by the grand piano, a flute of champagne in her hand, regaling the crowd with tales of her latest triumph. "Starlight Ventures didn't just get acquired," she said, her voice smooth as velvet. "We chose Apex Global. It was a strategic move to scale our vision." My dad nodded like a bobblehead, his face lit up with adoration. My mom clasped her hands, beaming, as if Sophia had just invented electricity. Meanwhile, I stood by the bar clutching a glass of bourbon, trying to blend into the wallpaper. I'd just come from a 14-hour day at Apex Global, where I'm a director of strategic acquisitions. But here in this room, I was nobody. Sophia's eyes caught mine across the crowd, and that familiar smirk curled her lips. It was the same look she'd given me since we were kids, the one that said, "You'll never measure up." She raised her voice, ensuring every aunt, uncle, and family friend heard. "Oh, look, it's Ethan, the PowerPoint wizard who thinks a spreadsheet is high-tech." The room erupted in polite chuckles, each one like a needle in my chest. My face burned, but I bit my tongue, like I always did. I'd learned long ago that fighting back only made me look petty, but the sting was sharper this time, maybe because I knew something she didn't, something that would turn this whole charade upside down. Then, from his velvet armchair near the fireplace, my grandpa James set down his glass of scotch. At 82, he's a retired economics professor with a mind like a steel trap. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, cut through the room's chatter. "That's a bold claim, Sophia," he said, his voice calm but heavy, like a judge about to deliver a verdict. "You make it sound like you called all the shots in that deal." Sophia laughed, a little too loudly, her confidence wavering just a fraction. "Well, Grandpa, that's how negotiation works. You project strength." James didn't blink. His gaze shifted to me, slow and deliberate, and I felt the weight of it like a spotlight. "Ethan," he said, and the room seemed to tilt. "You're in that world. Can a company teetering on the edge of collapse really dictate a $60 million deal?" The laughter died. The clink of glasses stopped. The room went so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the city 40 stories below. Sophia's smirk froze, her eyes narrowing. My parents exchanged confused glances, and, for the first time in my life, every single person in that room was looking at me. Not at Sophia, not at her brilliance, but at me. My heart pounded, a wild drumbeat in my chest. This wasn't just a question, it was a match struck in a room full of gasoline, and I was holding the flame. The penthouse was a frozen tableau, the Christmas lights twinkling mockingly against the stunned silence. My Grandpa James's question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Can a company teetering on the edge of collapse really dictate a $60 million deal? Every head swiveled toward me. Ethan, the guy who'd always been relegated to the shadows of my sister Sophia's spotlight. Her champagne flute trembled slightly in her hand, the confident smirk she'd worn just moments ago now cracking like thin ice. My parents, William and Elizabeth, stood rigid by the fireplace, their faces a mix of confusion and irritation, as if Grandpa had just disrupted their perfectly scripted play. The room's warmth, those scents of roasted duck and peppermint brownies, felt suffocating, like a stage lit too brightly for the drama unfolding. Sophia recovered first, tossing her head back with a laugh that was sharp and brittle, like glass about to shatter. "Oh, Grandpa, come on," she said, her voice dripping with forced ease. "It's called negotiation. Starlight Ventures didn't just get bought. We orchestrated the deal. Apex Global needed our tech, our vision. We set the terms." She waved her hand, dismissing his question as if it were a pesky fly, then turned her gaze back to me, that familiar condescending smile curling her lips. "Right, Ethan. You wouldn't understand, though. You're too busy making pie charts for middle management." The crowd tittered, a few cousins offering awkward chuckles, their eyes darting between us. My jaw tightened, the old heat creeping up my neck. It was the same script, the same jab she'd been throwing since we were kids, reducing my entire career to a punchline. I could have let it slide, like I had 1,000 times before. I could have grabbed another bourbon and retreated to the corner, letting Sophia bask in her glory. But something in me snapped. Maybe it was Grandpa's piercing stare, or the weight of 35 years of being invisible, or the knowledge that I held the truth she didn't even suspect. My hands unclenched from my pockets, and I took a step forward, feeling the polished hardwood floor beneath me, like a stage I was finally ready to claim. "Actually, Sophia," I said, my voice low but clear, cutting through the room's tension like a knife, "I understand more than you think." Her smile faltered just for a split second, and I saw a flicker of unease in her eyes. She wasn't used to me pushing back. Not like this. The room's attention shifted, the air growing heavier, as if everyone sensed a storm about to break. My dad opened his mouth, probably to defend Sophia, but I held up a hand, stopping him cold. "Let me finish," I said, my gaze locked on my sister. "You're right about one thing. Starlight Ventures was a strategic move, but not the way you're spinning it. Apex Global didn't beg for your tech. We targeted your company because it was bleeding cash faster than a Vegas slot machine. You had 90 days left before insolvency. 90 days. Sophia's face drained of color, her champagne flute now gripped so tightly I thought it might crack. The room was a vacuum. No one breathed, no one moved. My mom's hand flew to her chest, her eyes wide with disbelief. My dad's proud grin vanished, replaced by a bewildered frown. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" he stammered, but I didn't break eye contact with Sophia. She was staring at me like I'd just ripped the curtain off her carefully staged performance. Grandpa James leaned forward in his armchair, his expression unreadable, but his eyes gleaming with something like approval. "Go on, Ethan," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'd spent decades teaching others to see the truth in numbers. "Tell them." I took a deep breath, the city's hum faint through the windows, grounding me. Starlight Ventures wasn't some golden ticket. I continued, my voice steady, each word deliberate. Your burn rate was catastrophic. Your two biggest clients bailed months ago, citing costs and lack of support. You were delaying payroll, Sophia. Your employees were one missed check away from walking out. And that deal, the $60 million, that wasn't you outsmarting Apex Global. That was us seeing value you didn't even know you had. A buried algorithm your team forgot about. One we had to save from your mismanagement. The silence was deafening. Heavier than the Manhattan skyline outside. Sophia's mouth opened, then closed. Her usual quick wit failing her. The cousins, aunts, and uncles stood frozen, their holiday cheer replaced by shock. My parents looked like they'd been slapped, their eyes darting between me and Sophia, searching for a way to reconcile their golden child with the truth I'd just laid bare. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the background actor. I was center stage, and the spotlight was mine. That moment in the penthouse with Sophia's face crumbling under the weight of my words wasn't just a single explosion. It was the detonation of a bomb that had been ticking for 35 years, built from a lifetime of being overshadowed, ignored, and dismissed. As the silence stretched, the glittering Manhattan skyline outside seemed to mock the chaos in the room. To understand why I finally spoke up, why I couldn't stay the quiet, invisible Ethan any longer, you need to know where this all began. Let me take you back to the roots of this story, to a childhood where I learned to live in Sophia's shadow. Growing up in our family's brownstone in Brooklyn, I was always the afterthought. Sophia, 4 years older, was the golden child, the prodigy who could do no wrong. At 12, she was building apps in our cluttered basement, her code lighting up my dad's face like he'd discovered a new planet. "This is genius, Elizabeth," he'd say to my mom, holding up Sophia's latest project like it was a masterpiece. "She's got an engineer's mind, a real visionary." Meanwhile, I was 10, sitting at a rickety desk in the corner, sketching out a business game on graph paper. It was a complex system, supply chains, profit margins, even a mock stock market crash. I'd spent weeks on it, my little heart swelling with pride. But when I showed it to my dad, he barely glanced at it. "That's nice, Ethan," he mumbled, already turning back to Sophia's glowing screen. Nice. That word was a knife, cutting my world down to nothing. It wasn't just one moment. It was 1,000 tiny cuts. At my high school graduation, when I'd earned a full scholarship to NYU's Stern School of Business, my dad gave a toast. He spent 6 minutes raving about Sophia's internship at a Silicon Valley startup, her world-changing potential. He forgot to mention me, the graduate, until Grandpa James cleared his throat and said, "Let's not forget Ethan's achievement today." My dad blinked, flustered, and muttered, "Oh, right. Good job, son." 2 words that summed up my existence in their eyes. An afterthought. A footnote in Sophia's epic saga. The worst was a 4th of July barbecue when I was 22. Fresh off landing a competitive internship at a top Wall Street firm. I thought, maybe this time they'd see me. I shared the news as we stood around the grill, the smell of burgers and charcoal in the air. My mom nodded politely, then turned to Sophia. "So, Soph, tell us about your new AI project." Later, Sophia pulled me aside by the cooler, her voice dripping with pity. "Wall Street? Isn't that just hype for companies that actually innovate? You're like the cheerleader for the real tech, right?" Her words hit like a punch, echoing my deepest fear. That I was a fraud, a nobody pretending to matter in a world where she was queen. But there was one person who saw me. Grandpa James, with his sharp economist's mind, pulled me aside that same night. We walked to the edge of the backyard, the Brooklyn skyline faint in the distance. "Ethan," he said, his voice steady, his hand heavy on my shoulder. "Your parents see the world in code and circuits. They understand building things, not building value. Those are different skills, and yours is just as vital. Don't let them make you think it's less." He looked at me, his eyes fierce with belief. "You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to be ready when your moment comes. Claim your space, son. It's always been yours." Those words became my anchor. I stopped chasing their approval, stopped sending them articles about my promotions or deals I'd closed. It was futile. Instead, I built my own world at Apex Global, where I carved out a reputation as a relentless strategist. But standing in that penthouse with Sophia's mocking words still ringing and Grandpa's question opening a door, I realized the past wasn't just history. It was the fuel for this moment. The boy with the graph paper game, the graduate ignored at his own celebration, the intern dismissed as a cheerleader. He was still in me, and he was done being silent. The penthouse was still reeling from my words. Sophia's smug facade shattered, and the weight of every eye on me felt like a spotlight I'd never wanted but couldn't escape. To understand how I got to that moment, standing tall in a room that had always made me feel small, you need to know what I do when I'm not dodging my sister's barbs at family gatherings. My name is Ethan, and I'm a director of strategic acquisitions at Apex Global, a Manhattan-based juggernaut that hunts for value in the chaos of the corporate world. While my family worshipped Sophia's tech genius, I was quietly building a reputation as a master of seeing what others miss, finding diamonds in the rough and turning them into gold. My world is numbers, patterns, and strategy. I lead a team of 15 analysts, a group of brilliant caffeine-fueled minds who dissect companies like surgeons, peeling back layers to find hidden potential. We don't just buy businesses, we rewrite their futures. In the 18 months before that Christmas showdown, I'd closed 7 deals worth over $900 million, earning a reputation for being meticulous and relentless. My best friend Ryan calls me a corporate alchemist, turning failing ventures into cornerstones of Apex's empire. But to my family, I was just the guy who makes slides. That all changed one crisp October morning in my office on the 52nd floor of a glass tower overlooking Central Park. The city was alive below, yellow cabs weaving through streets like threads in a tapestry. I was on my third espresso, reviewing a report from our analytics team, nicknamed the Vultures for their knack for spotting weakness. The email's subject line was cold and clinical. Project Starlight, Q4 acquisition target. I clicked it open, expecting another routine analysis. Instead, my stomach dropped. The report was a 40-page autopsy of Starlight Ventures, Sophia's company. Our models showed they were hemorrhaging cash at a terrifying rate, with less than 90 days before they'd hit insolvency. Their flagship AI logistics platform was a house of cards, overhyped, underdelivered, and built on a shaky foundation of bad contracts and missed deadlines. I leaned back in my chair, the city's hum muffled by the glass walls, a cold knot tightening in my chest. This wasn't just a failing company, it was my sister's empire, the one she'd bragged about for years, the one my parents had staked their pride on. Ryan, my confidant and colleague, texted me from across the office. "You see the Starlight report? This is wild." I typed back, my fingers shaky. "It's surreal. That's Sophia's company." His reply came instantly. "Poetic justice, man. Ice cold." But I didn't feel vindicated. I felt like I was standing at the edge of two worlds. My professional life, where I was respected, and my personal life, where I was invisible, colliding with enough force to tear me apart. For years, I'd kept those worlds separate, a firewall to protect myself from the family's indifference. But now, that firewall was crumbling. The report laid bare Sophia's failures, delayed payrolls, clients jumping ship, and a supply chain so fragile it could collapse with one bad day. Yet buried in the data, I saw something else, a spark of brilliance, a forgotten algorithm tucked away in their R&D budget that could revolutionize real-time logistics tracking. It was a game changer, and Sophia didn't even know it existed. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. This wasn't just about saving a failing company, it was about saving something extraordinary from my sister's mismanagement. And I was the only one who could do it. I walked to my boss, Claire Morgan, a no-nonsense VP who'd championed my rise at Apex. Her office overlooked the Hudson, the morning light glinting off the water. "Claire," I said, closing the door behind me, "I need to talk about Project Starlight." She looked up, her eyes sharp. "Great target, high potential, terrible management, perfect for you." I took a breath. "The CEO, Sophia Carter, she's my sister." Her eyebrows lifted, but her professional mask didn't slip. "Okay, you're off the negotiation team. Conflict of interest. But your brain stays in the game. You know her weaknesses better than anyone. Run the strategy, Ethan. Be our ghost in the machine." Her words hit like a shot of adrenaline. This wasn't about revenge. It was about being valued for my expertise, forged in the shadows my family had cast. Grandpa James's voice echoed in my head. "Claim your space, son." For the first time, I felt ready to do just that. The penthouse was still a battlefield of stunned silence after I dropped the truth about Sophia's company, Starlight Ventures, being on the brink of collapse. Her empire of bravado had cracked, and I, Ethan, the invisible brother, was suddenly center stage. But to understand how I orchestrated the $60 million acquisition that turned her world upside down, we need to rewind to the weeks leading up to that Christmas showdown. In my office at Apex Global, high above Manhattan's pulsing streets, I was waging a silent war, one that would redefine my family's narrative and my place in it. My team and I set up shop in a windowless conference room on the 52nd floor, a space we called the War Room. It was a sterile box, smelling of stale coffee and dry erase markers, its walls plastered with flowcharts, financial models, and timelines. The Vulture's report on Starlight Ventures was our Bible, a grim portrait of a company drowning in debt, with a burn rate that could bankrupt it in 90 days. My team was small but lethal. Lisa, a razor-sharp M&A lawyer who could spot a contract's weakness from a mile away. David, a data wizard who made balance sheets confess their sins. And Ryan, my right-hand man who knew the Walsh family drama better than anyone. Our mission: dissect Starlight Ventures, find its hidden value, and build a strategy to buy it, without Sophia suspecting I was pulling the strings. We dove into the data like detectives, tearing through vendor invoices, Glassdoor reviews, and even Sophia's polished investor calls. The deeper we dug, the uglier it got. "This isn't just bad management," I said one late night, pointing at a cash flow chart that looked like a cliff dive. "They're betting everything on a single supplier for their AI platform's core chip. No long-term contract, no leverage. If that supplier raises prices by even 10%, Starlight's margins collapse." David nodded, his voice quiet but firm. "And if the supplier cuts them off, their production stops in a week." Lisa scribbled on her legal pad. "That's our leverage. We hammer them on the main product's flaws to drive the price down." Then we found the diamond. Buried in Starlight's R&D budget under a vague code name was an algorithm for real-time logistics tracking. Light years ahead of the competition, it was elegant, revolutionary, and completely ignored by Sophia's team, a side project they'd shelved for flashier products. I stared at the specs, my pulse racing. "This is it," I whispered. "This is why we're buying them. Not their failing platform. This algorithm is the future." Ryan grinned. "Sophia's selling a sinking ship, and she doesn't even know there's buried treasure in the hold." But there was a catch, a legal landmine that could blow the deal apart. Lisa flagged it late one night, her voice tense over the phone. "Ethan, you need to see this now." She sent me a scanned contract from Starlight's early days when it was just Sophia and a coder named Dr. Elena Voss from MIT. The contract was a mess, but one clause was crystal clear. If Starlight was sold, all derivative tech from its first 3 years, including the algorithm, reverted to Voss unless she was paid a hefty sum. The algorithm, our entire reason for the deal, was from year 2. If Voss found out, she could sue Apex Global and claim the tech, rendering the $60 million acquisition worthless. My stomach churned. If Sophia caught wind of this, she'd try to renegotiate, maybe even cut a side deal with Voss to sabotage us. I spent 3 sleepless nights with Lisa and our top counsel, crafting a surgical plan. We'd structure the deal to place the exact buyout amount in an escrow account, securing Voss's rights after the sale without tipping off Sophia. It was like defusing a bomb while Sophia danced on the wire, oblivious. "We let her think we're buying her failing platform," I told the team. "We criticize its flaws, make her feel lucky to get $60 million. But the algorithm and its 3-person coding team, they're non-negotiable. That's what we're really after." Every move was calculated, every detail precise. I was the ghost in the machine, guiding Apex's negotiators while staying out of the room. Ryan called me after each session, exasperated. "She's acting like she's doing us a favor," he said. "She wants a $2 million consulting fee to transition her team." I smirked, staring at my models. "Give it to her. It's pocket change compared to what that algorithm's worth." I was building Sophia a golden bridge to walk across, and she thought it was her victory lap. The irony was so thick, it could choke you. The war room at Apex Global was a pressure cooker, its whiteboard-covered walls closing in as we fine-tuned the acquisition of Sophia's crumbling empire, Starlight Ventures. I just laid out a strategy to secure the revolutionary algorithm while keeping Sophia in the dark about its true value. But the deeper we dug, the more treacherous the ground became. Manhattan's skyline glittered outside, a cold reminder of the stakes in this high-rise chess game. My name is Ethan, and as I orchestrated the $60 million deal to buy my sister's failing company, I stumbled across a secret so explosive it could burn her world to ash, and I had to decide whether to light the match. Late one night, as the office hummed with the faint buzz of overworked computers, Lisa, our M&A lawyer, burst into the war room, her face pale. "Ethan, you need to see this," she said, shoving an encrypted file onto my screen. It was a financial report from a shady offshore lender buried in Starlight's records. Sophia hadn't just taken out a second mortgage on her Pacific Heights home to keep her company afloat. She'd borrowed $3 million from a predatory lending group with ties to organized crime. The terms were brutal, sky-high interest rates, and a personal guarantee that put her entire financial future, including her marriage to Olivia, on the line. If this leaked, it wouldn't just ruin her reputation. It could drag her into legal trouble deep enough to drown. I leaned back, the leather chair creaking in the silent room, my mind spinning. This wasn't just a business failure. It was personal desperation, a secret Sophia had hidden from everyone, including her wife. Ryan, my best friend and second in command, leaned against the doorframe, coffee in hand, his eyes glinting with grim satisfaction. "This is dynamite, Ethan," he said, his voice low. "She's been parading around like a tech queen, but she's one missed payment away from losing everything. You could end her with this, one call to a reporter, and she's done." His words hit like a punch, Part of me, the part that still stung from years of her condescension, wanted to expose her, to let the world see the visionary for the reckless gambler she was. But another part, the one that remembered Grandpa James's advice to claim my space without malice, held me back. I stared at the file, the numbers glowing like a ticking bomb. "If I use this, it's not just Sophia who gets hurt," I said, my voice tight. "Olivia doesn't know. This could destroy their marriage, their future." Ryan shrugged, his grin fading. "You've spent your life in her shadow, man. She mocked you in front of everyone. This is your chance to flip the script." His words echoed the rage I'd buried for years, the countless times Sophia's smirk had made me feel small, the family dinners where my achievements were ignored. But exposing her like this felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. It wasn't just about winning. It was about who I'd become if I did. I called Claire, my boss, and laid out the discovery. Her voice was calm but firm over the phone. "Ethan, this changes nothing about the deal. We're after the algorithm, not a scandal. But it's leverage. Keep it quiet, but use it to ensure she doesn't push back on our terms." She was right. The loan was a pressure point, a way to keep Sophia in check without blowing up her life. I spent the next 2 days with Lisa, crafting a strategy to subtly signal we knew about her financial mess without saying it outright. We adjusted our offer to include a clause covering undisclosed liabilities, a veiled reference to the loan that would make Sophia sweat without exposing her to the public. As the acquisition talks heated up, Ryan kept pushing. "You're too soft, Ethan," he said one evening over beers at a dive bar near the office, the jukebox playing Springsteen. "She's never given you an inch. Why are you protecting her?" I stared into my glass, the amber liquid catching the dim light. "Because I'm not her," I said finally. "I don't need to destroy her to prove I'm enough." But as Christmas approached, with Sophia's mocking words still ringing in my ears and the weight of her secret in my hands, I knew the penthouse showdown was coming. The question wasn't just whether I'd reveal the truth about her company, but whether I'd unleash the truth about her desperation too. The penthouse was a pressure cooker, the Christmas lights casting a mocking glow over the stunned faces of my family. My Grandpa James' question, "Can a company teetering on the edge of collapse really dictate a $60 million deal?" had ripped the curtain off Sophia's carefully staged performance. Her champagne flute trembled, her smug smile replaced by a flicker of panic as every eye in the room locked onto me. Ethan, the brother she'd just dismissed as a PowerPoint wizard. The air was thick with the scent of roasted duck and peppermint brownies, but the holiday cheer had evaporated, replaced by a silence so heavy it felt like the Manhattan skyline outside was holding its breath. Sophia tried to recover, her laugh sharp and forced. "Grandpa, that's absurd," she said, her voice pitching higher, betraying her nerves. "Starlight Ventures was a prize, not a failure. We set the terms with Apex Global. They were lucky to have us." She turned to me, her eyes narrowing, daring me to contradict her. "Right, Ethan. You wouldn't know. You're too busy formatting spreadsheets." The room chuckled uneasily, but the laughter died fast. My parents, William and Elizabeth, stood frozen by the fireplace, their proud smiles faltering. My dad opened his mouth to intervene, but I stepped forward, my heart pounding like a war drum. This was it. The moment I'd been silent for 35 years. "Actually, Sophia," I said, my voice calm but razor sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. "I know exactly what happened with Starlight Ventures." Her eyes widened, a flash of confusion crossing her face. I didn't flinch, locking my gaze on hers. "Your company wasn't a prize. It was a sinking ship. You were 90 days from bankruptcy, burning cash so fast you couldn't pay your 62 employees. Your two biggest clients walked away months ago, citing costs and no support. You were delaying payroll, scrambling to keep the lights on. Each word landed like a hammer, and Sophia's face drained of color, her flute shaking violently. The room was a graveyard of sound. My mom gasped, her hand clutching her necklace. My dad's jaw dropped, his eyes darting between us, searching for a way to salvage his golden child's image. My cousins and aunts stood rooted, their holiday cheer replaced by shock. Grandpa James leaned back in his armchair, a faint nod of approval in his eyes, urging me on. I pulled a slim folder from my suit jacket, the original acquisition report I'd written for Apex Global, and placed it on the glass coffee table with a soft thud that echoed like a gavel. Starlight wasn't chosen because you were brilliant, I continued, my voice steady, relentless. Apex Global targeted you because I saw value you didn't even know existed. A logistics algorithm buried in your R&D, so revolutionary it's worth more than your entire company. I built the $60 million deal from the ground up, Sophia. I saved your team, your tech, and your legacy from the mess you made. I paused, letting the truth sink in. The person who ran the strategy, who saw what you couldn't, that was me. The silence was a black hole, swallowing every breath, every movement. Sophia's flute slipped from her hand, shattering on the hardwood floor, red wine splashing like blood across the pristine white rug. The sound was explosive, a gunshot in the quiet. Her face was a mask of ash and shock. Her empire of lies vaporized in under a minute. My parents stared at the folder, then at me, as if seeing a stranger. My mom's eyes welled up, her hand still at her throat. My dad looked like he'd been punched, his world tilted off its axis. The cousins whispered, their faces a mix of awe and disbelief. Sophia staggered back, her breath hitching. "You're lying," she whispered, but her voice cracked, betraying her. She turned to my dad. "He's lying, right? This is nonsense." But he just stared at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the invisible one. I was Ethan, the architect of the truth, standing tall in a room that had always tried to shrink me. And Sophia, the queen of the stage, was left with nothing but the wreckage of her own illusion. The penthouse was a graveyard of shattered illusions, the spilled wine staining the rug like a wound. Sophia's empire had collapsed under the weight of my truth, and the stunned silence of our family felt like a vacuum, sucking the warmth out of the Christmas lights. I, Ethan, had just revealed that I was the mastermind behind the $60 million acquisition of her failing company, Starlight Ventures. Her face, pale and shaken, betrayed the queen who'd always mocked me as a nobody. But this wasn't the end of the story. I didn't want to leave her broken. I needed her to understand. So I followed her out to the penthouse's balcony, where the Manhattan skyline glittered coldly against the December night. The air was biting, the city's hum a distant pulse below. Sophia stood at the edge of the balcony, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, staring into the void of twinkling lights. Her shoulders were hunched, her usual confidence replaced by a fragility I'd never seen. The glow from the penthouse windows cast long shadows across her face, making her look smaller, almost lost. I stopped a few feet away, hands in my pockets, letting the silence settle between us. It wasn't the old silence of resentment or indifference. This was raw, heavy with the wreckage of everything I'd just torn down. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and ragged, not looking at me. "You must be loving this, Ethan, humiliating me in front of everyone. Mom, Dad, Olivia. You've finally got your revenge." The words were bitter, laced with a pain that cut deeper than her usual barbs. I shook my head, my breath visible in the cold air. "No, Sophia," I said, my voice steady but soft. "This isn't about revenge. It's about the truth. For once, it had to be said." She laughed, a broken, choking sound that was more sob than scorn. "The truth?" she snapped, turning to face me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "The truth is, I was drowning, Ethan. For 2 years, I've been drowning. I mortgaged our house, Olivia's and mine, to keep Starlight alive. I took loans I couldn't pay, from people I shouldn't have. Every morning I woke up sick, terrified of the next email, the next investor pulling out, the next supplier threatening to sue. I demanded that consulting fee from Apex because it's the exact amount I need to save our home before Olivia finds out." Her voice broke, tears spilling down her cheeks, catching the city lights. "It was all a house of cards, and I was just trying to hold it together for one more day." I stood there, the cold seeping through my suit, and for the first time, I saw my sister, not the untouchable tech queen, but a woman crushed by her own ambition. The loans, the mortgage, I knew about them from our due diligence, but hearing her confess, raw and unfiltered, hit differently. "I know," I said quietly. "I saw the reports, the mortgage, the shady lender. I know you were desperate." Her head snapped up, her eyes flashing with a mix of anger and shame. "You spied on me? You dug into my life like some corporate vulture?" "It's called due diligence, Sophia," I replied, keeping my voice calm but firm. "When you buy a company for $60 million, you look at everything. But that's not the point. The point is that algorithm, your team built something brilliant, something that could change the industry. You just didn't see it. I did, and I saved it, along with your 62 employees' jobs." I took a step closer, the balcony railing cold under my hand. "This wasn't about tearing you down. It was about building something real from the mess you made." She turned away, staring back at the skyline, her breath shaky. "You made me feel like nothing," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "All my life I had to be perfect, the star, because anything less meant I'd failed them. Mom, Dad, everyone." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. "And you made me feel like nothing," I said, the truth tasting bitter. "Every jab, every smirk, every time you called my work a joke. But I let you. I stayed quiet, let you and Mom and Dad define me by what I wasn't. That stops now." The silence between us softened, no longer jagged with anger, but heavy with shared pain. For the first time, we weren't enemies or rivals. We were just two people standing on a cold balcony, trying to make sense of the years we'd spent hurting each other. "There's enough room for both of us, Sophia," I said, my voice steady. "You don't have to fall for me to rise." She looked at me then, her eyes searching mine, and I saw something flicker. Maybe not forgiveness, but a spark of understanding. Fragile and new. The cold night air on the penthouse balcony felt like a slap, but it was nothing compared to the raw tension between me and Sophia. Her confession about mortgaging her home, borrowing from a shady lender, and hiding it all from her wife, Olivia, had stripped away her queenly facade, leaving just my sister, broken and vulnerable. The Manhattan skyline glittered below, indifferent to the wreckage of our family's illusions. I, Ethan, stood there, grappling with the weight of her truth and my own role in exposing it. But before we could say another word, the glass door behind us slid open with a sharp creak, and Olivia stepped out, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and fury. The Christmas lights from inside cast jagged shadows across her, making her look like she was standing on the edge of a storm. Sophia, Olivia said, her voice trembling but sharp, cutting through the icy air. What did Ethan mean about the house? And what loans? She clutched a wool coat, her knuckles white, as if bracing for a blow. Sophia flinched, her body tensing like a cornered animal. She turned to face her wife, but her eyes darted to me, a flash of panic begging me to stay silent. I didn't move, my hands still in my pockets, my heart pounding. This wasn't my fight anymore, but I couldn't look away. The truth I'd unleashed in the penthouse had spilled out here, onto this balcony, threatening to tear apart more than just Sophia's pride. Olivia, it's not. Sophia started, her voice cracking, but Olivia cut her off, stepping closer, her breath visible in the cold. Don't lie to me, Soph. I heard you. You mortgaged our home. You borrowed money from who? And you didn't tell me. Her voice rose, each word a knife, sharp with betrayal. We're trying to start a family, Sophia. IVF, our savings, our future. You put it all on the line without a word to me. Tears welled in her eyes, but her jaw was set, her anger a force that seemed to shake the balcony itself. Sophia's face crumpled, her hands trembling as she reached out, only for Olivia to step back. I was trying to protect you, Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible. I thought I could fix it. Keep Starlight alive. Keep us safe. Safe? Olivia snapped, her voice breaking. You gambled our home, our life on a failing company, and now I find out from your brother, of all people. She turned to me, her eyes piercing. Ethan, did you know about this? All of it. I nodded slowly, my throat tight. I found out during the acquisition, the mortgage, the loan, it was in the financials. Olivia's gaze hardened, shifting back to Sophia. And you let me stand in there, smiling, thinking everything was fine, while you were lying to my face? Sophia's shoulders shook, tears streaming down her cheeks. I didn't want you to worry, she pleaded. I thought I could handle it, make it right before you found out. Olivia shook her head, her voice dropping to a whisper, cold and final. You didn't trust me, Sophia. That's not love. That's betrayal. I need to think about what this means for us. She turned, her coat swirling, and walked back inside, the glass door sliding shut with a thud that echoed like a slammed book. Sophia stood frozen, staring at the door, her world unraveling in the frigid air. I stayed silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to say something to ease the pain, but this was their mountain to climb. I'd exposed the truth about Starlight Ventures, but I hadn't meant to detonate her marriage. Yet here we were, the fallout of my words spreading like wildfire. Ethan, Sophia said, her voice hoarse, not looking at me. Why didn't you just let me have my moment? I took a deep breath, the city's lights blurring below. Because your moment was built on lies, I said softly. And lies don't just hurt you, they hurt everyone who loves you. The balcony felt like a battlefield now, the silence between us raw and jagged. Olivia's words hung in the air, a threat of divorce looming like a storm cloud. I turned and walked back inside, leaving Sophia alone in the cold, her silhouette small against the vast, unforgiving skyline. The truth had set me free, but for her, it might have cost everything. The balcony confrontation left a scar on the night, with Sophia's world crumbling and Olivia's footsteps fading back into the penthouse. The Manhattan skyline glittered on, cold and indifferent, as I, Ethan, stepped back into the warmth of the Christmas party, where the festive glow now felt like a cruel mockery. The shattered wine glass still stained the rug, and my family stood in stunned silence, their faces a mix of shock and unease. My parents, William and Elizabeth, looked like they'd aged a decade in minutes. their eyes darting between the balcony door and me. I'd just exposed the truth about Sophia's failing company, Starlight Ventures, and my role in its $60 million acquisition by Apex Global. But the fallout wasn't just about business. It was personal, and the cracks in our family were now impossible to ignore. In the weeks that followed, the family group chat, usually buzzing with my mom's holiday plans and my dad's bad puns, went dead quiet. It was as if a bomb had gone off, and everyone was hiding in their bunkers, afraid to face the new reality. Sophia and Olivia left the party early, their faces tight with unspoken tension. I didn't hear from them for days, and the silence was deafening. I kept working at Apex, overseeing the integration of Starlight's algorithm and its three-person coding team, who were now thriving with new resources. But at home, alone in my apartment overlooking the Hudson, I felt the weight of what I'd done. I hadn't wanted to destroy Sophia, only to claim my space. Yet the cost was higher than I'd imagined. The first sign of change came 3 weeks later in an email that landed in my inbox late one night. The sender was Sophia. The subject line a simple moving forward. My heart raced as I opened it, bracing for anger or accusations. Instead, it was a short professional note asking sharp, thoughtful questions about her new role as a technical consultant at Apex Global. But at the bottom, after her signature, were 2 lines that hit like a quiet thunderclap. "Thank you for saving Starlight's team. I owe you more than I can say." It wasn't an apology, not the tearful reconciliation of a movie, but it was real. A crack in her armor, an acknowledgement that carried more weight than any grand gesture. Then my dad called, a rare event, since he preferred text to avoid real conversation. His voice was halting, awkward. "Ethan," he said, clearing his throat, "that acquisition. I read about it in the journal. Sounds like you did something big." He paused, then added, "I'm thinking of buying some Apex stock. What do you think?" It was clumsy, indirect, but it was the first time he'd ever asked my opinion on anything professional. I swallowed a lump in my throat. "It's a solid move, Dad," I said. "Apex is making smart plays." It wasn't a hug or a tearful confession, but it was his way of raising a white flag, admitting my world had value. My mom's gesture was bolder. A month after Christmas, the family group chat flickered back to life with a message from her. "Big news! Ethan's keynoting a tech conference in San Francisco next month. Who's up for a trip to support him?" My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan, a screenshot of her message with one word: vindication. At Apex, Sophia started her role, and I saw a change. She wasn't the swaggering CEO anymore. She was quiet, focused, asking precise questions about the algorithm's scalability during our first team meeting. For the first time, she was just an engineer, and a damn good one. Slowly, carefully, the family began to rebuild, not as the old lopsided stage where Sophia was the star, but as something new, fragile, and real. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was Ethan, and that was starting to feel like enough. The penthouse showdown and its fallout had rewritten my family's story, leaving the air clearer but the scars still raw. As I, Ethan, stood in my apartment weeks later, the Hudson River glinting below under a gray Manhattan sky, I reflected on what had happened. That Christmas night, I'd stepped out of Sophia's shadow, revealing I was the architect of the $60 million acquisition that saved her failing company, Starlight Ventures. The truth had shattered her facade, strained her marriage with Olivia, and forced our family to face decades of imbalance. But it also opened a door to something new, a fragile, tentative rebuilding of who we were. This isn't just my story. It's for anyone who's ever felt invisible, overlooked, or told their worth doesn't measure up. If that's you, stick with me to the end, because there's a lesson here that can change how you see yourself. Looking back, the real victory wasn't the moment I dropped the truth in that penthouse, watching Sophia's wine glass shatter on the floor. It wasn't even the promotion to VP of Strategy at Apex Global that came weeks later, with a salary that changed my life. It was the quiet, steady work of proving my value, to myself first, then to the world. Success isn't about the loudest voice or the brightest spotlight. It's about building something so solid, so undeniably yours, that no one can dim your light. Sophia found her footing at Apex, thriving as an engineer, free from the crushing weight of being the visionary CEO. My parents, William and Elizabeth, started to see me, not as Sophia's sidekick, but as Ethan, the strategist who'd reshaped an industry. My dad's awkward stock question, my mom's conference trip plan. They were small steps, but they were real. Here's the lesson. Don't wait for someone else to hand you your worth. Claim it, build it, prove it through your work, your choices, your resilience. Whether it's a family that overlooks you, a boss who underestimates you, or a world that tries to box you in, your value doesn't depend on their applause. It's in the late nights you put in, the ideas you fight for, the moments you choose to stand tall. I spent 35 years letting my family's script define me, but when I wrote my own, everything changed. You can do the same. Start small. Take one step, one project, one truth, and build from there. Your space is waiting. You just have to claim it. I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt invisible in your family, your job, your life? Share your story in the comments. I read everyone. It's not just about venting. It's about connecting, about knowing you're not alone. And if this story hit home, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Life isn't about waiting for the spotlight. It's about building your own stage and shining without permission. Let's do this together.